tutorial is designed to be used with the Winwick Mum Basic Sock Along 4-ply sock pattern. You can get a free copy of this from the Winwick Mum blog, and also you can use these step-by-step tutorials in case you've never knitted a sock before, and this will talk you through how to start from the beginning. You can also get the tutorials and the pattern in paperback and ebook form if that's what you prefer. And for more information on the particular child size sock and for photo tutorial help with this particular pattern, you can find that here on the blog. We're going to start by making 2 balls out of the one 100-gram ball of yarn that we have here so that we can work both socks at the same time. This is in Winwick Mum shade Wildflower, West Yorkshire Spinners yarn. We're going to start by taking out the end where the ball is wrapped from the outside, and then if you put your fingers in and wiggle the ball a little bit, you should be able to reach in and pull out a large amount. You're looking for about half the amount of yarn, so about 50 grams worth of yarn that you should be able to pull out of the ball. You need to keep pulling until you find the single length of yarn, and we're going to call the one that you've just taken out the inside ball, and you need to find the working end of the yarn, so more wiggling on the inside until you can find it. And once you've got it, you're going to ignore the very first colour, so in this case it's pink because you don't know where that was cut in the mill, and then you're going to work with the second colour. So for me that's the purple, and I'm going to see where the purple changes to the pink, and then that's what I'll be able to use when I'm starting to do the matching. So I'm going to go from there to the outside ball, and I'm going to keep pulling that yarn out until I find the same colour. Now there's the pink that I had in the first place, but I want to find the purple. Typically I've got a bit of a yarn bath going on there, so we'll have to unpick that, but it only takes a couple of minutes, and then once we've done that, then I should find the purple, and then that will give me the match. So 2 lengths of purple going on there, and when I put them together, then that's where it is, that's where my match is, and so both of those yarns will start at the same time, which means that both of my socks will be able to match when I start to knit them. It's always worth following the yarn up in both directions, just in case that first colour was cut at the start of a ball. Doesn't happen very often, but it does every now and again, and you don't want to miss out on using some yarn if you don't need to. And you can follow it down the other way just to check that it is in the right place. It won't be an absolutely perfect match just because of the dyeing process, but as long as it's close enough, then that will be fine for your pair of socks. If you want to wind your yarn into a ball at this point, then a centre pull ball is a really good way of doing this, and it's also very easy. Lay the yarn across your fingers and then start to wrap them in a figure of 8 motion around your thumb and your forefinger until you've got 10, 12 wraps, maybe a decent amount that you can get hold of as you take them off your thumb and forefinger and squish them together, and then start wrapping again. And you're going to wrap for a decent length of time, and remember also that you'll need to keep moving the yarn around so that you're not just going over and over in the same place. Then take your forefinger out so that you can hold on to the yarn that you've got, and then start wrapping again. And you're just going to keep going over and over. Your thumb is still in there holding the ball, and also making sure that you're not going to wrap that end around and into the ball that you're going to be working from. And then just keep going, just keep wrapping, keep turning it around, moving it into a different position so that you're turning it into a ball shape. And you're going to do that for the amount of yarn that you've got. You might find that you can take your thumb out after a while, or just leave it in. There's the end, it's all safe in there, and just keep wrapping and wrapping. It's really easy, and it gives you a nice neat ball to work from so that you don't have your yarn rolling about all over the floor. And then when you get to the end, there's your tail so that you can just keep pulling, and then you're ready to go. So we're going to cast on now, and I cast on with double pointed needles rather than trying to cast straight onto the long circular. This is a very long circular, it's 100 centimetres, which means that there's an awful lot of cable to work with. So rather than trying to cast on with that and get all tangled up in that great big long cable before I need to, I'm just going to use the double pointed needles just to get started. So the way that I cast on here is the way that I would normally cast on for a pair of socks. I'm going to tie a slip knot, so putting the yarn over to make a loop and then pushing the working end of the yarn through, and then I'm going to put the needle through that loop and pull it tight. I'm going to put the other needle into the loop, wind the yarn around, pull it through, and then put the stitch onto the needle, and then go between the two stitches, wind the yarn around, and bring it out to put it on the needle. And I'm going to keep doing that until I've got the right number of stitches. I'm working on 48 stitches here because I'm only making a small pair of socks, and I'm going to cast all of the stitches on that I'm going to need. Next, I'm going to transfer the stitches from the double pointed needle to the long circular. I'm only going to work on half of them, and then I'm going to use half of the stitches from the other double pointed needle. So I've done the cast on and 2 rows of rib, and then I'm going to work in rib for half of the stitches, so that's 24 stitches, and then I'm going to transfer the stitches for the other sock. It seems a bit fiddly to start off with, but it will make sense as we go along, and you can see how it is that both of the socks will be on the needle at the same time and the yarn will be working in the right way. So I'm just coming up to the end of these stitches, and then instead of continuing all of the stitches on the needle now, I'm going to put it down as best I can, and then I'm going to work on the stitches for the other sock. So it all gets a bit fiddly here, but just take your time and try not to do it at a time when you might be disturbed, but just continue now. So you're using the same needle tip in the right on the right hand side, and then you're going to transfer half of the stitches onto the needle so that you're ready to go. Now, a 2 at a time sock has a front and a back, and that's how we're doing that. So these are the stitches for the front of the sock, and then we're going to turn it all round and put on the stitches for the back of the sock. I'm just coming up to the end of the stitches here, and what you can see is that I've got 2 lots of 24 stitches on my right hand needle, and then the other sets of stitches are both down on the double pointed needles, and this is why it looks like it gets a bit fiddly. And then what you're going to do is turn it all around so that you're ready to go back along the 2 sets of stitches on the double pointed needles again. And you're just going to work in rib again. So start with the second needle. So that's the one that you've just used, and you're going to do the same rib that you've done all the way along. So that means that you can take all of the stitches off that needle, and then you've just got the stitches of the first needle to go. When you come up to the last stitch, then you're just going to take the double pointed needle off, and you've got all of the stitches from one of the needles on the long circular, and then you're going to now work in rib to take the second set of stitches off the double pointed needle. So you can see that that's that sock all fitted onto the cable there, and then you're just going to continue in exactly the same way with the second set of stitches. And once you've knitted those, then you'll be able to take the double pointed needle away, and that means that all of your stitches will be on the long circular then, and then we'll take a look and see how that looks and how we're going to knit the rest of the sock once you've got all the stitches in the right place. We're just coming up to the end, last couple of stitches here, and that's the double pointed needle gone, and all of the stitches now are on the long circular needle. They're all held quite safely, and the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to join those stitches into the round. So don't worry if it still looks a little bit flappy at the moment and you've got stitches and needle tips all over the place, because we're going to sort that out now. So here that all the stitches are ready to go, and all we've got to do now is join them into the round. So we're going to turn the work around, and you want to work on the stitches that are right in front of you. So we're going to push the needle tip back into the stitches so that you can work on those ones at the front. Don't worry about those ones there, they're quite safe on the cable, though you can push them up a little bit if you want to. And then you're going to pull the back needle out so that you're ready to knit with that needle tip on that front set of stitches. Now what I like to do here is I like to mark the front of the sock so that I know which way it should be facing when I finish my round. And I have these little stitch markers here. I'm going to attach one to the bottom of this sock, and I've got a second one that I'm going to attach to the bottom of the other sock. And it might be that for a while you can work out which way round it is because of the tail end, and later on you'll be able to work it out because of the heel, but it just makes it easier if you've got a front and a back to the sock. So I'm going to bring that cable and that needle around, and I'm going to hook my yarn underneath so that I don't get my working yarn caught up in the cable, and then I'm just going to carry on knitting in rib the way that I did before, and that's how it will join into the round. Don't worry if it's a little bit loose at first, it will tighten up as it goes along. You can pull the yarn, give it a little tug just to pull the stitches tighter, but the first 1 or 2 rounds may be loose. Don't worry about them. If you have to, you can sew them later, but I promise that they will tighten up as you go along. And then you're just going to work in knit 2, purl 2, rib, and you're going to do that right down the number of stitches for that sock. When you get to the end of the stitches for that sock for the rib, then just push them down safely onto the cable, and then you can push the other stitches up, and you're just going to do exactly the same thing. So put the same needle tip in, make sure that you bring up the working yarn so it doesn't get caught the wrong way around your cable, and then you're just going to knit those same stitches onto the needle tip, and the stitches on the right hand sock are not going anywhere. They're quite safe on the cable, so don't worry about them. Remember to give the yarn a little tug to close up the gap, and then you're going to work your way along those stitches in knit 2, purl 2, rib. This is what your sock looks like when you have completed the first round. It's a little bit loose there, but don't worry, I promise you it will tighten up. You're going to turn your work around again, and then you're just going to work back again. So remember that you're knitting on the stitches at the front, so you're going to pull the cable back to pull the needle tip in for the front stitches, and then you're going to pull the back needle tip out, and then you're ready to start your next round again. Remember to catch the working yarn so it doesn't get caught in the cable, and then knit 2, purl 2, just continuing in this way for the rib. You can see that I've worked quite a section of the rib now, and it's starting to take shape, and both of the socks are quite happy sitting next to each other on the needle. You're going to just continue working, knit 2, purl 2, rib until you've got the number of stitches that you need. And the rest of the cable is quite happy there. Mine's quite curly. Yours might be like that. It's always a good idea to soak the cable in hot water if it is a little bit curly, and then that takes away some of the memory and makes them a bit more manageable. But you're just going to keep working your way around from the front of the sock to the back of the sock until you've got the right number of rib rows. I'm working 12 rib rows for this smaller sock, and then I'm going to start just knitting plain for the leg section. You can see here how the edge stitches have all tightened up, so there isn't a gap anymore, and I'm just going to carry on knitting around now. It's still in rib, but I'm almost at the point now where I'm ready to start my plain section. So my rib section is finished now. They're both exactly the same length. The rib sections are both done together. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to work the leg sections together. So I'm just going to carry on knitting each round plain. We're ready to start the heel flap now. What I've actually done is worked 1 row across, so I'm actually going to be working the heel flap on the back of the sock. Doesn't really matter on a plain sock, but it would do if you were working with a pattern on the front of the sock. So I'm going to be working on those front stitches. As you can see, the ones at the back are quite safely held on the cable there, so they're not going to go anywhere, and everything just sits on the same needle. So I'm going to knit the first 2 stitches so that I don't get a hole, just the same as I would do knitting any other sock, and then I'm going to slip 1, knit 1 all the way across that first sock. And there we go, you can see that all of the stitches of the first heel flap row are there on the needle, and I'm going to start the second one. It doesn't really matter if you do them one at a time or you do them both at the same time working along the rows like this, because as long as you've got both socks finished to the end of the heel flap at the same time, then that's when you're going to be able to do the heel turns at the same time together. So I've knitted the first 2 stitches, I'm going to slip 1, knit 1 all the way along the row, and then I'm going to turn the work around, ready to work the purl row back. Going to work the purl row of the heel flap now. So it looks like you're actually working on the back of the sock because you're working on the back needle, but what you're doing is working on half of the stitches. So you're just going to go backwards and forwards over those same stitches whilst you work the heel flap. So this is just a purl row, which we're going to take across both of the socks, and then you can turn your work around again and we're ready to go with the right side row. So we slip the first stitch, knit one, and then you're going to slip one, knit one, all the way along both of the heel flaps until you've got the right height that you want. We're going to create the heel turn now, which is always the fun part, and this is the only section of these 2 at a time socks that you'll need to do separately, because if you think about the way that you'd create a heel flap on heel turn on a single sock, then you have a V shape with stitches on either side that you decrease. We're going to have it on the right hand sock, and then we're going to have exactly the same thing on the left hand sock, and what will happen is that you'd run out of needle space. So that left hand sock, we're going to transfer it over to the other side of the needle. We're going to slip the stitches purlwise so that they don't twist, and those stitches are going to sit safely on the cable whilst we work the heel turn of the other sock first. There they are, they're all safe on that needle now, and you can see they're not going anywhere. Nothing's going to fall off, nothing's going to get lost, but we're going to work on that other heel flap now. So we're going to slip the first one, and then you're going to purl the right number of setup stitches. Because I'm working on a 48 stitch sock, then that's 13 stitches. So I've slipped the first one, now going to purl 13, and then when I've done that, I'm going to purl 2 together and purl 1, and then I'm just going to work the rest of the heel turn the same way that I would do for any other sock. And you'll find all of that on the pattern. There's the purl 2 together, and then purl 1. I'm going to turn the sock around, and next I'm going to slip the first stitch, and then I'm going to knit 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to slip, slip, knit. You'll find more information on this on the blog if you need it. Slip, slip, knit, and then knit 1, and then I'm going to turn the stitches, turn that section around again, and then I'm going to work backwards. So slip the first one, and then I'm going to purl the stitches across, purl 2 together, and purl 1. So just exactly the same as it is in the pattern, and as you will have done for an adult sock, I don't make any changes to this particular section for doing a smaller sock. And then once you've done this purl row, you're going to turn the work around again, and you're going to keep going backwards and forwards on that heel turn until you've finished it. Here it is, it's all finished now. And before we start on the second one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up the stitches down that side of the heel flap. You'll notice that I've cut the yarn on the right hand side. That's just because I like to match my socks, so don't feel that you have to do that as well. I'm just going to join it in at a different place. Now what I am going to do is I'm going to pick up the big stitch that's down the side. It doesn't really matter whether you pick up the inside or the outside or both parts of the stitch, but it's this big stitch here, so you can pick up both loops or you can pick up one loop. That's the outside one. There we go, there's both loops again. It really doesn't matter as long as you pick up a loop on that section, and then that will keep your gusset free from holes as you're working it down. So we're going to put the needle in here. You might be able to see just a little bit more clearly on this picture here rather than one that's moving. There are the big stitches, and you want to pick up one of those, and you're going to do that all the way down the heel flap. It's 1 stitch for every 2 rows that are knitted, so depending on how many you've done, you will just pick up that number of large stitches. So I'm joining my new yarn in here, and I'm just going to weave the ends in as I go down. But if you didn't want to do that, then it's absolutely fine. Just keep going with the working yarn that you have already from the heel turn. Then I weave the yarn, I wrap it over and under the working yarn, and that just saves me having to sew it back in again later. Now I choose to just pick up the inside of the big stitch. It really doesn't matter. It's however it feels best for you to do it. There's no right or wrong here. You've just got to give it a go and see which way works best for you. So I'm picking up the stitches as I'm going down the heel flap here. As you can see, I'm weaving my end in at the same time so that I'm not going to have to go back and do anything. What I do to avoid a hole here is I pick up the leg of the stitch between the heel flap and the instep stitches, top of the foot stitches, not that loop there that you can see. If we zoom in there, if you see if you put a stitch into that, it'll create a big hole. So you want to pick up the leg of the stitch, and that'll be better for you. So there we go, I'm picking up not the pink one, that's the one that's below, but I'm going to pick up that purple stitch there. And I'm just going to create a new stitch into that, and that means I've got one extra. So if you've counted one stitch for every 2 rows all the way down the heel flap, then you just add one more. And there we go, I've done that now. So it looks a bit strange on the right hand side. There's the heel turn done, and then there is the first set of stitches that are picked up. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to not work all the way around on there because I need to do the other heel turn. So that's what I'm going to work on now. Now you'll see that the working yarn is in the wrong place because we want to work backwards on a purl row first of all. So what we're going to do is transfer the stitches back over onto the right hand needle. Remember to slip the stitches purlwise so that they don't get twisted on the needle. And so I'm going to just quickly transfer all of those back over so that I'm ready to start the heel turn on a purl row with everything the right way around. Okay, there we go. So everything's safe on that needle now, and what we're going to do is we're going to just create the heel turn. So turn it round, and then you're ready to do the setup row, which starts with a slip, and then it's going to be purl 13 on this short heel flap. So I'll just organise my needle there. It's the downside of very long circular needles, and you can see where I've woven the end in on this heel flap, but it's all neatly woven in there and it's all quite safe. So I'm going to slip the first stitch and I'm going to purl 13. So it will be a different number if you've cast on anything different to 48 stitches. This is just because I'm making a small sock here. Don't forget you can always check the information in the pattern and also on the blog tutorial. And I'm just going to create the heel turn in exactly the same way as I did for the other sock, so that I've got both of them together. There's the purl 2 together and then purl 1, and now I'm going to turn the work around and then I'm ready for my next row. So I'm going to slip 1 and then knit 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, slip, slip, knit, and knit 1. Turn around again, and then I'm ready to carry on. Now that the heel flap's done, I'm going to pick up the stitches down the left hand side again, just like we did with the other sock. So I'm joining in my new yarn as I'm keeping my colours in order. Really doesn't matter whether you do that or whether you continue from where you were before. And I'm going to pick up one side of the big stitch because that's what I like to do, but you can pick up either side or both loops of the big stitch. Absolutely doesn't matter, as long as you make sure that you pick up something of the big stitch, and then you're going to pick up and knit all the stitches all the way down the side of the heel flap. As you can see, I'm weaving in the ends again because I really don't like sewing ends in at the end of any project, so I like to weave them in as I go along, and then that minimises any extra work I have to do at the end. This is what your socks look like once you've picked up all the stitches. So on that left hand sock, there's the heel turn, there's the first set of picked up stitches. On the right sock, there's the heel turn and the first set of picked up stitches. We're going to go across the top of the foot stitches there, but we're not going to pick up the stitches on that side just yet because the working yarn will end up in the wrong place. So instead, what we're going to do is just work across the top of the foot stitches for both of them, pick up the stitches on that left sock first, work our way around, and then that will join both of the socks back into the round again, so you're working both at the same time. So what we're going to do now is just pull the cable out, make sure that there's enough loop to be working with. All of those stitches are quite safe on that loop while we work the gusset, and we're going to work both of those at the same time, so they both end up with the same number of stitches at the same time. Sometimes it's something that goes wrong with a gusset. So I'm going to pick up the working yarn so that it doesn't get caught in the stitches, and I'm going to knit across all of the stitches on the top of the foot. I'm just going to work my way along there. Once I've done that, you see I've gone across both of the socks there, it's time to pick up the stitches on the left hand side. So I'm going to pull the needle out, give myself plenty of space. This is the good thing about using such a big cable, even though it does get in the way sometimes. So I'm going to pull the needle out and I'm picking up the stitches in exactly the same way as I did before. So it's one picked up stitch for every 2 stitches worked. I'm going to pick up that extra stitch. Remember we talked about the leg and not picking up the loop in between the stitches. I'm going to pick up that first. Got myself in a right tangle with my yarn there. This does happen. There we go, fixed now. So I've got my stitches sorted. That's the first picked up stitch there. And then I'm going to continue to pick them up as I go along the edge of the heel flap until I get up to the top of the heel turn. So you're going to continue to pick up the stitches, either the inside, the outside, or both legs of the stitch, depending on your preference here. It really doesn't matter as long as you make sure that you've actually caught the yarn, and then you're going to work your way up the heel flap till you get to the heel turn. And then once you've done that, you're going to knit across the heel turn stitches. And once you've done that, then you're going to work your way down the heel flap stitches till you get to 3 stitches before the end where you work your first decrease. It's a knit 2 together decrease, so I'm going to knit those 2 stitches together and then I'm going to knit 1, and that's all of the stitches for that sock, all on that cable and that needle. All of the gusset stitches and the heel stitches, they're all there together, and we just need to do the same thing now with the sock on the other side. So I'm going to push that needle tip back in so that I've got some stability down there for picking up the stitches. I'm just going to rearrange my cables here. This is the great thing about this long needle, is that you can just push all of the stitches down onto the cable and it's all quite safe held on there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up that last set of stitches up the side of the heel flap. I need to pick up the stitch that's between the heel flap and the top of the foot stitches so that I don't get the hole. There it is. I'm going to work that stitch and then I'm going to pick up all of the big stitches again as I go up the heel flap. If you're not a fan of picking up stitches, then this has been a lot of stitches to do in one go. But the good news is that once you've done this, then there's no second sock to go back to have to pick up the stitches. So we're just going to carry on up the side of that heel flap now. And then once we've done all of those stitches, we're going to knit across the top of the heel flap, just like we did with the other sock. So we're going to work our way across there, and then you're going to pick up the stitches that are down the other side, and you're going to do the same decrease as you did before. That's a knit 2 together decrease, so we're going to knit those 2 stitches together, and then we're going to knit 1. And let's turn the socks around and have a look and see what we've got here, because you're back working into the round with 2 socks at the same time again now. It's not quite the same as working 1 sock with the decreases, but let's pull the cable through and then we can have a look and see how it's all going to work. Okay, so what we've got here is 2 socks, both with the stitches picked up ready for the gusset. You've got all of the top of the foot stitches, the instep stitches on the cable at the front, and then everything else is on the cable at the back. So we knit across those stitches, and then the decreases all take place on that back cable as you work your way around the sock. Okay, it's time to do more decreases now. So we've turned the sock around and you're going to do the first of the slip, slip, knit decreases. So knit one, slip, slip, knit, and then you're going to work your way around the sock until you get to the decrease on the other side. But actually you don't need to do a decrease this time, because don't forget that you did the decrease before, so you'll be able to see the two stitches knitted together into one. So you just knit plain over these stitches, and then when you swap to the second sock, then you're going to do your second slip, slip, knit decrease, and that's what you're going to do just here. Let's take a look at how the decreases work on 2 at a time socks, as it's a little bit different. So the start of the round is over on the right hand side, and you would work across the top of the foot stitches. So that's the front of your sock, and then all of the decreases are on the back of the sock or on the back needle. So you would do all of those at the same time, but you would do them on alternate rows. So what would happen is that you do the SSK on one round, and you would knit over the knit 2 together stitches, and then on the next round you would knit over the SSK decreases and you would do the knit 2 together decreases. So you would do the same 2 decreases together on each round. That means that you're still decreasing every other round, but you're only doing one type of decrease. Have a look at the tutorial on the blog if you need a bit more help here, or just rewind this video just a little bit to go back so that you can see how we've done the decreases so far. Alternatively, you could ignore the first K2 tog decrease, just knit over those stitches and then make the SSK decrease the first decrease on the next round, and do all of the decreases on the same round if you'd prefer to do that. I like to do it the other way around, the way that I've just shown you, but there's no reason at all why you couldn't do it the other way if you really wanted to. So now it's time to start knitting the foot of the sock. There's your heel done. That's one sock. There's the heel flap and the heel turn. There's the second one, it's all done. There's the gusset. And so to keep both socks the same length, you're just going to work both of the rounds at the same time. So there's all the stitches there safe on the needle as you're going to work on the front and then the back stitches to complete the foot. It's time to get these socks finished off now, so let's get into the toe decreases. Both of the socks are exactly the same length. We created the heels in the same place, and because you've got a front and a back of the sock, that means that the decreases will be in the right place as well. So what you're going to do here is create one on both sides of the first sock and then both sides of the second sock. We're going to turn the sock round and then do exactly the same thing, so that means that all of the toe decreases are taking place on the same round on both of the socks. So you're going to pull the back needle out. I'm going to knit the first stitch, and the first decrease is a slip, slip, knit decrease. You're going to knit across the number of stitches that you've got until you've got 3 remaining, and that's when you're going to do your second decrease. And the second decrease on the sock is a knit 2 together decrease. Just work our way across here. There we go. We're going to knit those 2 stitches together and then knit 1, and then you're going to do the same thing on the second sock. So it's a slip, slip, knit decrease first, 1 stitch and then the decrease. You're going to work your way along the sock until you've got 3 stitches left, and then you're going to work your second decrease. It's especially important when you're working the toes to remember to pull the yarn quite tightly as you go from one needle to the next, so that you don't get a gap that goes up the side of the seam where your toes are going to be, because you'll wear that through much more quickly than you might do otherwise. Just coming to the last couple of stitches here, and I'm going to do the knit 2 together decrease. There it is there. Oh, I'm having a bit of trouble with this one. There we go, got it now. And then knit 1, and now I'm ready to turn the socks around, and I'm going to work the decreases on the back of the sock so that they'll be exactly the same. Keep decreasing until you get down to the number of stitches that you want before you graft the toes together. On this child's pair, I've gone down to 20 stitches. That's 10 on each side. So now we've got the same number of stitches on the front and the back needles, and we're ready to start the grafting. To get the Kitchener stitch started for the socks, I've cut a length of yarn about 12 inches, 30 centimetres, and quite often people suggest that you should do a setup stitch, so you would go in purlwise first, but you do sometimes get an ear that sticks up if you do that. So I'm going to go into the first stitch knitwise, slip it off the needle, and then into the second stitch purlwise, and leave that on the needle. Now I'm going to go to the back needle, I'm going to go into the first stitch purlwise, keeping that loop under the needle, slip it off, and then into the second stitch knitwise. And we're going to repeat that all the way along the sock. So back to the first needle again and into that first stitch, keeping the yarn underneath. I'm going to go in knitwise, slide it off, give it a little tug if you need to, just to keep it neat, and then into the second stitch purlwise. Back to the back needle, we're going to go in purlwise, slip it off, second stitch, knitwise, keep it on the needle. Next, we're going to go back to the first needle, in knitwise, slip it off, second stitch, in purlwise, leave it on. You'll see that the stitches are starting to come together across the top of the sock now. They just look like an extra row of knitting. So as you carry on working the stitches as you've done before, so on the back row, that's purl and slip off, knitwise and leave on. Back to the front row, knitwise and slip off, purlwise and leave on. And just keep repeating this to yourself over and over. It's always best to do this at a time when you're not going to be disturbed, because it's really difficult to pick it up again if you get distracted. But it's all on the blog if you need to have another look, or you need to look at photographs of how to do it a bit more slowly. And you can always reduce the speed of the video as well if you look in the YouTube settings. Just got the last few stitches to go, and then I'll show you how I finish off so that I don't get an ear on the other side of the sock. So you're still going in knitwise on the front needle, and then purlwise. Purlwise on the back needle, and then knitwise. And we're down to 6 stitches in total now. So once we get to 4 stitches, that's when we need to look at how it is that we actually finish it off. Oops, caught the loop there. Right, so what I do here is I work on the first stitch, but the second stitch I don't go through it twice, I only do it once. So we go through with the knitwise, slide it off, and then purlwise, just as you would do normally, and then do the same thing on the back. So you go into it purlwise, slide it off, and then knitwise, but instead of going back to the front again, just slide both stitches off the needle, give it a little tug to tighten it, and then we're going to go back and sew that loop over so that you don't see it once your sock is finished. So there's all the stitches, and you just look like a row of knitted stitches. And what I do next, I put my hand into the sock. It's only a tiny sock, I'm having trouble getting my hand in here. And then I take the yarn over the top of the loops and sew it into the sock. Now, depending on the colour of the yarn, I might choose to go down the length of the stitches down the side of the sock, and I go in and out with every other stitch. And I'll get away with this one because it's a similar colour, and as soon as the stitches go back together, then I won't be able to see it. But sometimes you might need to take the yarn actually inside the sock and then sew it so that you weave the ends in from the inside of the sock, and then you don't notice that there might be any colour changes. Once you've done that on both socks, your pair of 2 at a time socks is all ready to wear.